welcome to a brand new episode of the Ziganalysis. My name's Arun, that's Tushar, and in this video, we'll be discussing Mahindra's current electric flagship SUV, the XEV 9E. It's not an XUV anymore.
Yep.
First things first, do you like that it's not called an XUV electric?
I'm indifferent to that. I get the reason why they're going with XEV. It's just a little bit difficult to say because the nomenclature gets so mixed up.
Yeah.
XUV 700, XEV 9E, E9, you get confused with that. And then, of course, you have the B. But before we get into the digression, I think one thing that we need to set is a bit of context. We've already made a video about the B6E, which is the second vehicle that has been introduced on the InGlow platform. They were brought together. And the core of these vehicles is identical based on the same platform, using the same basic architecture when it comes to software, features, powertrains, safety tech, crash safety ratings even perhaps are going to be more or less the same. But as we had said in that video, if you haven't seen it already, the cars, in spite of having so much in common, are worlds apart in terms of the experience that they offer.
Yeah.
And while both of them are doing plenty to reach out to your heart, the XEV 9E is the more sensible pick of the two. That one is outright bratish. This is walking that fine line between sensibility and sexy.
I feel there is a very clear differentiation in the targeted age group.
Yeah.
Forgive me for going all marketing, but the B60 seems like a 25 to 35-year-old's car. This feels like someone who's got a family, a large family at least, or just regularly uses the rear seat. I see two use cases for the XEV 9E. And like you said, it is amusing to me that both a 4.8 meter vehicle like the XEV 9E and a 4.4 meter vehicle like the B6E have the exact same wheelbase.
2775 millimeters.
With that kind of design flexibility that Mahindra has had with this new InGlow platform, I wasn't entirely sure why the XEV is not part of the BE family. But once you start to get to know the product, you realize, hey, this is maybe a 2.0 version of their existing product, which is why they do not want to band it with the BE bandwagon, which is made completely ground up.
Correct. And I think that the XEV is also giving us some insight into what we can expect as changes that will come into the XUV.
Yeah, from the facelift.
There is a degree of familiarity in terms of the products, and that's also why I feel on the internet, once those short videos and all went up, the excitement was a lot higher for the B60 because it was entirely new, besides being extremely out there as well. But let's start with how the XEV 9E looks. And like we've seen with its platform cousin, Mahindra has stayed completely true to the concept. With the exception of maybe the change in color, this thing looks practically exactly like the concept car. And by that, I mean it is a very good looking car.
Yeah.
By virtue of being 4.8 meters, it also delivers that same thing that we had said, that coupe SUVs having size on their side makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
So having a great length, having the right height, and definitely having a great width to give you that squat stance, it can give you that same vibe as an X6 or a GLE. So the road presence on this thing is incredibly strong. And of course, like we've seen in the concept car, the lighting elements are a major draw of how this car grabs attention, besides this being a coupe SUV alone. So it has the nostrils, I think the mustache that goes in over here and suddenly turns into a tusk with the LED DRLs. And you also have the bi-function availability there, that you have dynamic turn indicators, you have the LED headlights as well that have been integrated closer in. And it's definitely a look that, besides being modern, is still giving you that typical aggression of IRVM clout, interior rear view mirror clout, if I may say so, that you typically expect from a Mahindra car.
It's funny you say that, because we were returning to our hotel from the launch and this was late, I think past midnight. And suddenly this swarm of bees and the zivs, right? They're swarming in our rear view mirror. And my first impression of the XEV is of that light signature.
Yeah.
And in my head, I go, hey, if I was driving right now and I saw this in my rear view mirror, I'd give way. Because it is, I'm not sure if this exists, but it is the fun kind of scary looking.
Yeah, it's because I think it's more coming from a curiosity standpoint that if this is what it looks like from the front, I want to see what it
Yeah,
looks like the side and rear too.
exactly.
It piques that.
So the side is possibly my favorite angle,
Agreed.
and it's not something you usually say of coupe SUVs, especially ones that are kind of force fitted into a smaller footprint. But with the 9e, they obviously do not have those restrictions. The designers have had a wild time stretching out the roof very slowly into the boot. The 19-inch wheels for a car that size might seem a little small. I'd possibly pick the optional 20s for if I was buying an XEV. But there are quite a few common elements with something like the XUV 700, for example. Like the mirrors are shared, the flush fitting door handle is shared. And when you move to the rear, that is where Mahindra has been clever in integrating hidden rear door handle and even the edge to edge lighting on the rear end itself. That looks really eye catching. Now, we've all put out reels of the XEV 9e against the Lamborghini Urus on the road. Sometimes I feel Mahindra plants
I
these cars.
swear that timing was too convenient, as was the color of that.
Yeah,
No offense to
because
the owner if you were there, but we couldn't help it.
for half an hour, that Urus was the most photographed car on the planet. But it is interesting to see how this stacks up, right? Because when you think of coupe SUVs, generally you're like, oh, you've copied an X6, oh, you've copied, the Urus. No, it's a body style. A
Yeah,
sedan is a sedan, like just because it's a three box. A coupe SUV is a coupe SUV. It's a
precisely.
design template. But that rear end is something. I especially like the way the dynamic turn indicators just simply flow out. It's done very well and it just works,
Yeah.
right? No lighting glitches, none of that. I love the way the reverse lamps have been positioned and how the charge port has been very cleverly hidden. Very Kia EV6 like detail, but it's done, it's executed beautifully. Attention to detail right
Yeah,
there.
and the actuation of that charger flap, in case you're wondering, because it's also interesting that even though the core charging point itself is same as the B6E, the location of where you access the port is slightly different. On the
Yeah.
B6E, it's on the fender. Over here, it's rear towards the tailgate. And another factoid to throw in here, real quick, is the ground clearance, because that's one number that people were asking.
Yeah.
I think it's common to both cars, 207 millimeters unladen as per their internal measurements, and there is additional clearance for the battery pack itself. So that number somewhere on 220-ish millimeters, if that they were wondering. And since we are on the topic of numbers,
Yeah.
one of the big numbers that you get with the XEV 9e is the boot space number.
Yeah.
It's north of 660 liters on paper, but as we maintain, these are arbitrary figures. Well, usability wise, it's always a function of how they're measured.
Right, because just for reference, okay, very recently we saw the Skoda Kayak that's claiming over 400 liters of boot space for a boot that is physically smaller than the Kushaqs, which is rated at 385 liters. So the takeaway here is take these numbers with a pinch of salt. It's done by an agency to get a number,
Yeah,
pretty much that. This is possibly the figure if you load it up right to the roof,
correct.
which you will not. If you use the parcel tray, what you have is a small rectangular box to play with.
Pretty
I mean,
much.
not entirely small, but I'd say the space is restricted by way of what you can put in it. For example, we were carrying two different sizes of cabin trolley bags, right? Your cabin trolley bag is slightly taller than mine if it's been made to stand on its side.
Yeah.
So the cabin trolley bag I have fits very easily under the parcel tray, and I can possibly stack 4 of those cabin trolley bags and have space for backpacks, duffels in the front. But if I use the cabin trolley bag that you do, it simply would not go rest against the seat. It hits the bottom of the parcel tray. So in case you want to maximize the space that's on offer with the XEV's boot, you will need to pack smartly, because one large suitcase or possibly two medium-sized suitcases, that boot's packed out straight up.
Pretty much. And that roller type fitment that we have,
Yeah.
that is something that most people might land up removing altogether, especially
Yeah.
if they need to use up all of the boot space available. I won't say it's impractical,
Yeah, it's not.
but there is some degree of a consequence from that coupe roof line, plain and simple, nothing else to it. So that way it's practical enough for a car that ultimately is a 5-seater.
Correct.
So if you want to get a car for airport runs, yes, there is space. You just
Yeah.
need to fiddle around a little bit with that
Yeah.
little parcel shelf. And we should also mention that much like the B6E, the spare tire has also been integrated underneath the boot floor.
Yeah.
But it is a space saver.
It is. It is. Also, just before we wrap up the boot space section, there's a very thoughtful flap on the side of the, on the side panel that you tug to lower the second row seats. That is just very helpful. Of course, getting it back up, you have to go to the seat and push it up. And the recline on the rear seat kind of decides the boot space you have, but Motamodi, you've got enough boot space for a weekend getaway or airport runs. That's not an issue. From the exterior and the boot, let's move on to inside the car.
White interior, yet again, the one thing we fear the most.
Uh, White interiors are like white sneakers. Great on day one,
Yeah.
not on day two.
That
That's
is there.
right. It it's just not something that Mahindra should have done, because of course it adds to the sense of luxury. It adds to the sense of space. The cabin looks bigger than it is. It is a big cabin by itself, but that sense is rightly there. But it is horribly impractical in our conditions.
Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible to live with it, of course, but there is a little bit of a headache with upkeep, especially in our dusty
There is,
conditions.
because Mahindra has been rather clever with the kind of textures and finishes and colors they've used elsewhere.
Yeah.
For example, they've not gone with the staple black. They've chosen a sage green, olive green kind of a shade that's on the leather wrap on the dash and on the top half of the door pad. That's executed quite well. Even the two-tone seats, so as to say, is white and greenish. It's not entirely black. It's not too dark either. So that's finished very well. I just wish that that white wasn't there. In terms of quality, I want to say it's maybe half a level above the 700,
Yes, I was exactly going to say that.
because the graining of the plastic, it's gotten smoother, right? There's no mishmash of textures like we've seen on the XUV 700, and what they've done is there's just more coverage in terms of leatherette wrapping on the, on just more surfaces have that.
Correct.
I think they've learned that with the 3XO, where that finish extends all the way to the rear, and they're like, hey, this kind of works.
And it does
Let's just do it.
it does enhance the cabin's experience significantly, because on the off chance if you touch anything while resting also, it just feels consistently premium in that way, but it also feels familiar on the inside in terms of design.
It
That
does.
is a major area where the personality conflicts between these two in-glow platform-based vehicles come up, because the B60 is evidently aimed towards being very toy-like, very fun, on the borderline of being frivolous. But here it is familiar because the core dashboard design is the XUV 700.
It is.
You can see that. Even the way the door pads have that little bit of a Mount Everest rise
Yeah.
as you get towards the wing mirrors. That's same with the XUV 700, same with the powered seat controls being integrated onto the side over there in the door pad itself. So it feels familiar, but an upgrade in that sense. So quality wise, design wise, this is a lot more sophisticated, I want to say, than the B60. And it is a premium place to be in. It is a mature place to be seated in, and it is a uplifting experience on the cabin. It definitely feels like an upmarket car.
See, that it is, and there are two things that stand out for me from a design perspective. Okay. Number one, for the first time ever in an Indian car, we've got a triple screen layout.
Yes.
Now, what that does, should it really have three screens?
We'll get to.
We'll get to it. But from a visual standpoint, you sit inside the cabin and you're like, wow, okay, that sex appeal is there. The second bit is the steering. That has been redesigned as well.
Yes.
It's not the same unit as the B60.
The center bit itself with the horn pad
Yeah,
and the
that's
key
the
controls
same.
are the same.
Yeah, but this isn't flat on the top.
No.
This is just a flat bottom. That is just flat on the top and the bottom as well. But it's got an illuminated logo, Tata. You've got a very interesting kind of integration for the regeneration buttons.
Yes.
Usually on electric vehicles, they're paddle shifters.
Correct.
On this, they're like game-like buttons. And you've got buttons on the lower half of the steering wheel as well for one pedal drive mode and for your boost mode. You've got your audio call controls, what have you, ADAS controls. It's a very well done steering wheel with a very premium wrap and a center marker as well, which is a very interesting touch, I thought. From the design, what I gather is that Mahindra's trying to appeal to the second type of EV buyer. Okay, the first type is, hey, I'm buying an electric car for the novelty of it. Let's go all out.
Yeah.
The second one is, I want some degree of familiarity. And that is exactly where the XEV is playing, where it is new enough to give you an EV experience, but it is also familiar enough so that it does not overwhelm you in terms of the cabin experience, or like the B60 does.
Correct.
One annoyance that has to be mentioned is that of the haptic feedback touch controls on the center console as well as the steering wheel. While this is possibly something you can get used to in the long run, it does feel oddly fiddly to use. The controls just don't have the tactility of regular buttons, and it's not helped by the fact that the AC control as well has to be done through the touchscreen. On the horn pad, for example, the touch-based controls don't quite give you the confirmation as and when you need it exactly, and you can land up accidentally hitting the horn more often than not. Basically, couple of things over here feel a little bit form over function.
We should move on to space because that is critical of a car this size. And of course, when you're spending big money on a car, electric or not, in India, big money equal to badi gadi equal to spacious gadi. Okay, bada admi.
Yeah.
I think you're the best person to describe what the XEV is like. Let's start with the front seat.
Okay, let's move from the height down order, I guess, from me.
Sure.
Easily between the B60 and this is the car I would pick from a sensibility standpoint. It is
Okay.
more comfortable to be in. There is more space, and while the wheelbase itself is identical to that car, the dimensions change in terms of length. It's not purely a function of accounting for a bigger bonnet area or a bigger frunk
Yeah.
or a bigger boot per se. The cabin space itself also, there is a notable difference in how much room there is.
Yeah.
Am I perfectly comfortable sitting behind my own seat at somebody who's 6'5"? Probably not.
Yeah.
My knees are going to touch over there. But I do have a reasonable amount of headroom both in the front and rear row.
Okay.
Just about enough to
Okay.
the point where I'm not going to be uncomfortable with it. In the B60, for me, it gets a little bit hemmed in at the rear. Here, not the case. So if you are a 6 foot tall person behind another 6 footer, you have, I think, about a fist and a half's worth of knee room still to spare.
Standard measurement for rear seat space.
Pretty much. And it's also going to be a more accommodating, more sort of spacious place to be seated in, even if you're looking to put 5 people in, because the cabin width is also greater in terms of that utility. So cabin space wise, yes, if you're looking at a good 5-seater, this car is definitely there. Is there a little bit of that floor intrusion thing where we typically have with electric cars, battery pack eating into your seat position and putting your knees up a little bit? Yes, marginally. Is it going to be an issue? I don't think so, because even I was not really uncomfortable with the kind of underthigh support that was available with me sitting behind somebody who's, let's say, 5'7", 5'8".
Yeah.
So
See,
I'm not
it's-
putting myself as a benchmark. I'm just saying the exception can be a great measure for the rule.
What do you say brings me to this observation? A high floor generally means a knee up seating position. What Mahindra has done to tackle it is kind of increase the length of the seat squab. Right? So even if you're sitting flat, the seat squab just extends, further ahead. So you've got more room and you've got more support rather, for your under thigh. Anyone up to 5'8", 5'10", 5'11", probably 6 feet will not really have an issue with this. But the only issue I had with the XEV's space or comfort rather was incidentally the same issue I had with the B60 was me donking my head, knocking my head on the A pillar section or the roof section while getting in and out of the car, in the car rather. If you are anyone who's in around 6 feet tall, you will have to duck and get inside the car. There's no two ways about it. There's no avoiding that. But once you're in, it's a pretty comfortable place to be. You've got 3 headrests at the rear. You've got a nice, comfortable central armrest in case. Also, I think the XEV 9e would do really good as a 4-seater. Maybe I'm not sure if you remember the XUV Aero concept.
With a center console in between where you
Yeah.
can basically make it a captain seat sort of experience.
Side
Lounge
note,
seat.
yeah. Side note: the XEV 9e to me is the XUV Aero concept come to life. It's just that,
Just for context, we'll have to find that image, but that was
Yeah.
based on the 500, not the 700.
not the 700. But in theory, that design's finally come. Anyway, we digress. Practicality, really good,
Yeah.
really good. Actually usable
Door
door
pockets.
pads. Who would have thought in 2024 you've got enough space even if you store your 1 liter bottles in the doors to put more knickknacks. You've got a huge central cubby under the front armrest. You've got 2 usable cup holders. You've got 2 shelves for your phones but 1 wireless charger, and the glove box itself also has a separate shelf, and then it's got a tiny little storage space. You've got seat back pockets, the works. So from a storage practicality standpoint, absolutely no issues there as well. What it does rather surprisingly is carry overs or rather build on what was an already impressive feature list of the XUV 700.
Right.
I'm using the XUV 700 as a benchmark here purely because the features to price ratio that the XUV 700 delivers, it almost makes you wonder, hey, if you should be picking a 50 lakh rupee plus German SUV.
Correct.
Right? There are completely different reasons for picking that. We'll not go there. But this kind of betters that. And there's just so much to do. There's just so much to go through. Let's do it in a bullet point style, okay?
Cool.
We'll riff. So it's got an NFC card unlock, which is an accessory, but it's there.
Correct.
You've got keyless entry.
With that new key that is including a lot of functionality,
Yeah,
lock, unlock.
but no magnetic.
Yeah, because it doesn't have that same sort of slot
Center
for putting your
console.
key in.
Yeah.
That's not there. You have power adjustment for the driver's seat along with memory settings,
Hmm.
ventilated front seats.
Yeah.
You have the same toggle style power window controls, and again, one touch up down only for the driver's side.
You've got dual zone climate control. You've got rear AC vents. You've got a fixed glass roof.
Panoramic, along with ambient lighting that has been piped into the roof as well as the cabin altogether.
Yeah. And you've got 3 touchscreens. I think this is a good time to talk about the 3. Oh, no, wait. 2 touchscreens and 1 screen. 3 screens.
Yeah, technically that was not
Yeah.
touch, of course. So let's start with the last screen.
Ooh.
I will always maintain, and this is something that happened when Mercedes-Benz also introduced the 56-inch hyper screen, as it
yeah.
were. That third screen is not a needed thing.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, that is something that, if I'm not mistaken, even Pack 1 or the entry-level variant is going to be offering. So I'm not going to do any kadi ninda for this, but there are a couple of issues that come up with that, right? So first, let's talk about operation. Operationally, that screen is fine. It was loading a little bit slower than the main touchscreen itself, in my experience. And you have a long range of functions that you can control from there. That main screen is meant for, the third screen rather, is meant for the front passenger to enjoy whatever, music and entertainment. You have games on board, so YouTube Kids, Amazon Prime. I'm not sure if Netflix was there just yet. And of course, you had the onboard apps like Ghana that also functions as a screen that you can use for work, for example, because the XEV 90, much like the B60, comes with an onboard camera that faces inside the cabin. So you can actually take video calls and all using that. Of course, you have an onboard internet system that you have to pair that with. So if you use that, that can be used for making video calls and all, for example. And it is a functionally fine thing. Not all that necessary, because a lot of the things, it's like, why would I need the screen here? And especially a problem comes up because when you're watching videos, for example, it wasn't switching off when the car was in motion.
Yeah,
it's not linked to your handbrake or anything.
It is distracting to the driver because it's not like the screen blanks out when you view it from the driver's
Different
side
angle.
either.
Yeah.
For an example, Range Rover does that because the same screen can show 2 different kinds of
Correct.
content, but this cannot, and it is always distracting. I think there's an overload of screens in life in general. I do
Correct.
not need more screens in my life. But here we are. And I'm genuinely waiting for the day when some manufacturer says, hey, we've got 0 screens in the car.
That's not going to happen.
Or it will be a feature 10 years later. You never know, because God knows we all need that digital detox. Anyway, that screen is, in my view, unnecessary, but one of those things that you can show off, and we'll leave it at that. The central screen is another 12.3-inch touchscreen. It's essentially the same unit. Has a base in Android, has Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, has got a host of apps. It's got a selfie camera function with an in-car camera that
Correct.
you can, and it also has AI filters, so you can put the Mahindra logo over your eyes if you want. You can turn yourself into Bumblebee. There's a lot of stuff that you can
It
do.
honestly feels like Mahindra is expecting this car to be used more while parked than being driven, because the kind of equipment that you have available with it.
Well,
So besides wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, of course, you have a lot of other functions that we're going to start seeing in many Mahindra vehicles.
yeah.
So one is the Groove Me function, like we'd mentioned before.
Yeah.
It's an activation program that loads up some music, syncs with the ambient light as well as the exterior lights to give you a whole song and dance, along with the mirrors and flip out type door handles as well. So the whole car has this little show it puts up for you. That aside, it also has the selfie camera function that you mentioned. Of course, that is something that if you want to use it for the video call function, that's something you operate from the third screen, if I'm not mistaken. And because it has the 360-degree camera available with this car, it also comes with Secure 360, which in my view is an extremely useful feature, which is essentially like Tesla's Sentry mode. So if you have the car parked, there's some kind of motion around it. So besides recording while your car is on the move, even while it's static and you're not near the vehicle, you can either use your phone app to access that feed, or if there's movement around, somebody messes with your vehicle, it can be captured and you can get that information for any evidence gathering as well. That music system, that head unit rather, is paired to a 16 speaker Harman Kardon sound system. Again, like we saw with the B6E, sound experience is something that they've given a great priority to, and the
Yeah.
execution is great. That is something you can elaborate a little bit more than I can.
Okay, so with this system, I noticed that it kind of gets more enjoyable the louder you play it. Okay, that's not something that's true with a lot of the other music systems that we test that generally tend to crack or
Yeah.
at higher volumes.
That's when
This
Ishan
one's
would crack those jokes, na, ki speaker phat raha hai to sila le.
hi Ishan. Anyway, on audio quality, it's really delivering. Whether you're streaming music, if you've got lossless audio, it's something that this car is genuinely capable of pumping out, and you'll enjoy it. And it's not just music, right? For the B6E also, we discussed this briefly. It's got this program called Live Your Mood, which is basically playing ambient sounds designed by A.R. Rahman. Even that, the clarity with which it plays is just so good. It's so appreciable. And it might seem like I'm raving a little, but what's good is good.
Yep.
Credit where it's due. And you're literally bombarded with speakers. There's one right above your forehead for some reason. And you're just being surrounded. It's like someone's taking you and just dunking you in a bucket full of sound. That
Yeah.
is what it feels like. And I'm all for it. Right? If I had some seat massagers and
Pay more money, then you'll get it.
anyway, but on the infotainment front, they've got it spot on.
Yep.
I think that is something that customers today value more and increasingly more, I want to say, and they've got that down pat.
So the instrument cluster, what do you think of that? Because my experience, it had the same issues that I had mentioned previously with the B6E as well as the XUV 700. There are certain points in the operations. It's obviously operated from the steering wheel itself. It takes a little bit longer than I would have liked while shuffling through different menus to be used when you're on the move. But that aside, if they can get the smoothness side, the interface itself is easy enough to understand. And it is also quite nicely animated. So there are different responses that you get even if you change up the driving modes. So it has three. There's the race mode, everyday mode, range mode. Self-explanatory. That's sport,
Eco, normal,
eco,
sport.
and sport, city, and eco. That aside, the display screen also gives you a very detailed animation of what's happening when you're operating ADAS, Advanced Driver
Yeah.
Assistance Systems. So there is adaptive cruise control, auto emergency braking, lane assist. It also is offering a unique feature for an Indian ADAS system, wherein if you are following a vehicle and you use the indicator,
Yeah.
the car is not only going to obviously override lane assist if you have it activated, but it can make the overtake automatically as well if it detects that there's enough safety. The ADAS system, by the way, uses a single camera up front along with, I think, 6 sensors to operate the entire system. And you can see a live feed of all the animations because the camera is capable of detecting individual vehicles based on their size. So you get a proper display telling you what is a motorcycle, what is a car, what is a truck, what is shifting from where to where, and it's happening pretty quickly. Like there's not much of
in
a
real
gap between
time.
the action and what you're seeing on the screen. So definitely some very advanced and luxury car tech. In fact, tech we've not seen in some luxury cars that is making their way into this. Operationally, my only real concern with any of this is that stuff did glitch.
Yeah.
And when we spoke to Mahindra, they mentioned that these cars are not technically pre-production.
Yeah. They're
They are-
production spec, but running beta software.
Correct. That is what they had mentioned.
Yeah.
So we did have, and not just us, couple of journalists had this issue where the instrument cluster bogged down.
Froze,
It needed to be reset. And this happened with both the cars that we had tested. There were times where you were having issues with connecting Bluetooth that wouldn't read. There were a couple of cars where Apple CarPlay was being detected and working, other cars where it wasn't. And Mahindra is infamous now for having some kind of delayed relationship with Apple CarPlay, that you buy the car, wait for like 6 months, a year, and then somewhere during some kind of OTA that suddenly works
So
up
that
or
you
something.
feel like you've got a new feature down the line. That's pretty much.
Yeah, it's something to anticipate, as it were. So yeah, definitely we're hoping that by the time these cars go to market, that these software glitches, hitches and all are completely
Ironed
taken
out.
care of. And what features you pay for in the brochure when you're signing the invoice is what you're getting on the day of delivery. That's something that we're definitely quite hopeful for. Now that the features have been taken, is there anything important that we're missing right now? Safety, let's talk about safety.
Wait, heads-up display. This got augmented reality in the heads-up display. Even when the augmented version of the virtual reality does not kick in, by itself, it's a super sharp heads-up display. gets you your basic information. It'll also tell you about the music you're playing. ADAS assists are incorporated straight into the heads-up display, which
Correct.
I think is a super neat touch. Very helpful to have, warnings from the blind spot feed just come there before it shows up on your mirror as an actual warning. That's very, very thoughtfully done. The car also runs a layer of artificial intelligence. Mahindra something artificial intelligence, rather, it's called Maya.
Hmm.
It's there. From there on, we move to safety, where we actually saw the XEV 9E being crash tested,
Live from literal feet away.
right? And that just demonstrates the product confidence, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely.
If you are willing to show nearly 300 journalists, hey, here's my brand new car that I launched last night, now watch me smash it to pieces.
Because very realistically, considering we are looking at an Indian car and they are definitely keeping one eye on India and the other eye on their export markets,
Yeah,
they might be looking at getting a car that is ready for Euro or Australian NCAP.
probably.
We're not going to put up, any kind of validation over here ourselves,
Yeah,
but that's definitely going to be a target if you want to get some kind of success in those markets. Because
sure.
what's the point of having an extremely tech-loaded car if you can't, get the appropriate
No,
rating?
fair. And I think at least Mahindra in particular has burned their hands with the Scorpio's test result in Australia.
Yeah.
So that is something that they possibly might want to look at. And the kit is there.
Yes.
You've got 7 airbags, you've got all the tech wizardry you want: traction control, hill descent, stability control, isofix, tire pressure monitoring, you name it. Of course, there's level 2 ADAS that we discussed. Also, the calibration of the ADAS is super India friendly.
Yes.
It just works. Except for a couple of times where I think Tushar had to wrestle the steering.
Yeah, with lane assist that was happening. So this was another issue that we were facing, not with this one. That was
Yeah.
with the B60, where lane assist was not quite
Switching off
deactivated.
entirely. Yeah.
So that is one of those, again, glitches that we're talking about that will have to be ironed out, polished out as the products actually hit the market. I don't want to go out on a limb and say that this is the most dependable ADAS setup yet, because we
Yeah.
did not experience it in enough conditions. So a little more drive time, a little bit more variety, and I still feel no matter what you do, simulations cannot keep up with India. It's not possible.
I agree, because, and he says that because we had a tour of Mahindra's research facility, and they showed us how they calibrate ADAS,
Yeah,
right?
one of the
And
initial phases.
Yeah, one of the initial phases of ADAS calibration before it goes to on-road testing.
Correct.
And it's literally two guys playing driving simulator. I'd love to apply for that job, by the
Yeah.
way. But Indian conditions are a little too dynamic. This is not to say the ADAS system is not capable. It's just you never know what happens on Indian roads.
There are conditional limitations that will apply to any ADAS setup, but by what we experienced in this car, it has proven to be reasonably India friendly so far.
Yeah.
One time I actually got the pedestrian auto braking to activate, not with
when
some
you were
random person,
trying,
with
when you were
literally
trying to
him.
run me over.
So we have this format on car, they could call the Fatafat review, and you always see Arun running for the first time on camera,
I
where
need
I'm
to run
chasing
in general, but
I chase him around in the vehicle, and at one point before I got too close, the car just
yeah,
did that bit because
yeah.
it thought I was going to run into Arun. It read my intentions. But yeah,
Hey.
so that's it about ADAS. But of course, drive experience, ADAS, that stuff, we'll get into more details once we spend more time with the car itself. But that's a good enough segue, I think, into the drive experience and what we had on this short drive that we did in Chennai.
Basics first. 2 battery packs.
Yes.
59 kilowatt hour, 79 kilowatt hour. Claimed range is out there. It's above
We'll put
600
the figure out.
kilometers. Real world range, Mahindra says in different cities they've tested, the ballpark figure is 500 kilometers real world.
Yeah.
Now the reference point for me is a Kia EV6.
One thing we should mention, that 500 to 550 kilometer range that we're looking
It's
at
for the
real world,
79.
for the 79. With the 59, it will be closer to 400 to 450.
Yeah. Now 500 is the number for me because you and I have range tested a Kia EV6.
Yes.
500 and something kilometers, 502, 503 kilometers, that is where the EV6 tapped out.
The all-wheel drive version.
All-wheel drive version. And that, I feel, is all the range you need.
Yes, I'd agree.
At that point and at that crucial 500 kilometer mark is where I say this is enough. Ye bus hai. Because let's be honest, you get a 2-liter petrol engine in something like the Tiguan or the Kodiaq. They'll do 500 kilometers on a tank max if you drive it inside the city. Maximum.
Yeah.
Right? You get something like a diesel Compass or say a Meridian. 500 kilometers on a tank, 700 on the highway. But for something like an XEV that is primarily going to be an intercity car, right? And or at best an intercity plus intracity, it won't be interstate.
Hmm.
It's more than enough range. You can do Mumbai, and still have 200 kilometers of charge left, which is enough possibly for your weekly run in the office. From a range standpoint, they've got it right. That's what I want to say. We've driven the 79 kilowatt hour version. All of the versions are only rear wheel drive. There's no all wheel drive option, although the platform is capable. 0 to 100 is 6.8 seconds
Yeah, that's
for
insane.
that Hathi.
Yeah, but that's what about it, right? When you hear 6.7 as a figure,
Hmm.
the Nexon EV at 9 odd seconds
Feels
felt
quick.
more dramatic.
Yeah.
This felt a lot more composed, and even in race mode with boost function activated, it just wafts along.
Yeah.
It gave me that old feeling that you'd get with like mid 2000s German cars,
Yeah.
that they have big V6s, but they don't like throw you back in the seat that way.
Yeah.
They're quick and you can see the numbers stacking up on the speedometer real quick. But experientially, it's not something that's going to make you feel very jerky or throw you back, which is a good or bad thing, whichever way you look
I
at it.
mean, I have a feeling it's got more to do with how cut off you are from the outside world. The insulation, especially for noise, it just shuts you out of everything.
100%.
And that kind of warps your understanding of what kind of speeds you're doing.
Yes.
Because at one point within, let's say, in controlled environments, we were possibly north of 140.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, yeah, I might be doing 9500. I looked down and like, oh,
Yeah. So the entire shoot happened at MSPT, Mahindra's SUV proving track. So yes, it is a completely cordoned off zone where we were dedicatedly trying to push these cars to the top speed. In fact, I took the B6E to 202 kilometers per hour,
the rated top
which
speed.
is the electronically limited top speed for both these cars, and we did it with 3 people on board. And I'm one person, so that's technically 4 people on board.
Yeah.
So the cars are very quick, so that you can use that as a reflection as to what kind of performance you have access to. Even if you were to get the smaller battery pack that runs a different state of tune, right? The smaller battery pack, it's rated around 230 horsepower, 380 Nm. Bigger battery pack is 285-ish horsepower, 380 Nm. Experientially, both these cars are going to definitely meet any functional requirement that you have of city commuting, of overtaking, of highway cruising. But simultaneously, what I loved about it is this level of sophistication you had in how they operated.
Yeah.
Because up until now, there has been that little feeling of jugaad that we've seen with a couple of electric cars, where it doesn't feel perfectly connected for somebody who's moving from ICE to EV for the first time. A lot
There's
of
a
times,
learning curve. Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of times I feel what happens is because we are testing cars day in and day out, we take for granted the process or learning curve that people have to go through when they shift cars. Because they're not shifting cars every week, they're doing it once every 7 years. So that is where the throttle responsiveness, the gradual nature of the power delivery, even when you're in sport mode or if you have boost activated, the regen calibration, how it's so direct and intuitive that as much you let off the throttle, it is gently getting onto the brake and it feels like this lovely, creamy little seesaw. So even if you put it into one pedal mode, it's manageable. It's very easy to understand and very predictable to manage. And even when we were driving out on the highway, I was pretty much sticking to one pedal mode.
Yeah.
So that way, Mahindra has done a great job of making this a car that feels on par with any global player that we've experienced in India, including cars like the Kia EV6, Mercedes EQA, everything in between.
Even the Ioniq 5 for that matter.
Yes.
And I think Ioniq 5 with 20s gives me a good enough segue to the XEV 9e on 19s and the ride.
Sublime.
Between the two, not that you'd possibly be picking because the price segment will be quite different. The XEV is decidedly the more comfortable car. And it's comfortable by a sizable margin over bad roads.
Correct.
Just because of the larger size of the car, it just feels more composed.
Yeah.
There's no side-to-side rocking that we experience in the 6E. This one just hop, skips, jumps straight over it. And on good roads, it's muska.
It has that added level of give, I'd say. Like
Yeah.
if you were to draw parallels, I'm not sure how many people will get this reference. The B6E is a little bit more Volkswagen in terms of the sportier setup with the suspension, like a Taygun or a Virtus. The XEV 9e is more in your Grand Vitara territory, where it's not going to feel as sharp,
Yeah.
but it has a little bit more give, little bit more bump absorption, little bit more comfort to it. So it doesn't feel as lively while driving. Both of them are comfortable, but there's a notable tilt towards comfort when it comes to the XEV90. And you can also see that with the steering calibration, because they
Yeah.
do have the lightness that you need for city driving quite easily. So while this is a large car, it doesn't feel its size when you're maneuvering it about. At the same time, when you're on highway speeds, it doesn't feel too twitchy, too light. It's not rich in feedback. But traditionally, what we've seen with a lot of Mahindra cars is the steerings are very disconnected. They're very vague. Not the case here. Quite predictable.
I want to say that about the brakes also.
Yes.
That's been my bugbear with a lot of Mahindras. And then you just can't guess the feel. Surprisingly, in an electric vehicle where it's already tricky
Yeah.
to get it right, they've got it right.
Correct.
And no matter what mode you're in, the pedal feel remains the same. I appreciate that. It's very direct, it's very predictable, and it's not something that you have to learn to use.
Correct.
It just works.
Correct. Couple of things to point out over here. Your regions can be controlled from the steering control itself. So you have the plus and minus toggles on top. It's not like a paddle shifter like you traditionally expect. The one pedal mode button is on the bottom left. That is something you can activate. One issue I ran into with this, and I'd mentioned that to Mahindra's R&D as well. When we were driving at speeds of 60 to 70 kilometers per hour, one pedal mode was working as intended. Once I crossed 100 at certain points, for some reason, it just went off.
Okay.
So when I let off the throttle, I was like, okay, why is this not slowing down? And I went back onto the brake. So again, because these are kind of sort of test vehicles, I'm giving them a leeway, but I have to mention it.
They put a literal sticker in the car. All of them, all 140 cars.
That's the reason why a lot of the experience that we have here, we have to put some terms and conditions because the car has not gone to market yet.
Yeah.
As long as they fix all this, and they have been very keen to get our feedback, definitely if they're watching this video also, I hope you guys take this in the right way and have it applied before the cars hit the market. These are the kind of things that can be a little tricky to understand for somebody getting into the EV space for the first time. So that's why I want to wait a little bit, save my reservations for once we get to experience the cars a little bit more in the long term. But yeah, one pedal mode, the calibration itself, when it works, absolutely bang on. And you also have that boost mode function on the bottom right of the steering to get that. The other issue was the gear selector. Now, unlike the B6E, it doesn't have that fighter jet throttle style thingy. I don't even know if fighter jets still have that. I just assume it is.
Yeah.
It has this, what do you call it? Like a shoehorn-like gear selector, you can call it.
Yeah.
So the front and back motions shifting between them, again, I have the same issue. That there's no button for you to press that you're actually, okay, now I am telling the transmission that I want to select this gear. And even when you do, it's not like a properly defined cut to tell you what you've selected. There has to be a little bit more an added level of awareness that is brought in for the driver, because you don't want to mess about with this stuff. You don't want to accidentally be in reverse when you want to be in drive.
Yeah, let's say there's no feedback for the driver that lets him know, unless you look at the tiny light that lights up, or if you look at the instrument cluster, there's no way of knowing if that action's actually executed cleanly.
Correct.
That's a very minor inconvenience, I'd say, but it is there nonetheless. Should we be wrapping this video up?
I think we can. Since we were talking about the drive experience, it's important to talk about the charge times also. So they'd mentioned 20 to 80% using a 175 kilowatt charger. It's somewhere around 20 minutes. Realistically, in India, you're getting 60, at best 120 kilowatt chargers for the most part. But with that also, I'd say two things. If you're using a 50 to 60 kilowatt charger, that 500 kilometers of range is going to cost you maybe an hour's time at one point. Then there is that bigger question of most people do end up relying on home charging. So it's like using your phone. So if you do your office commute, you plug it in overnight, it's done in a slow charger itself. The only catch being that they have mentioned that starting price of 21.9 lakh rupees, I believe, ex-showroom.
Without any charger.
Yeah, so they do have multiple home charging options that they give you, 7.2 and 11 kilowatt. But that will be an surcharge on top of that, most likely be in the territory of 30 to 40,000, I'm guessing.
Also, unsolicited advice, buy the 11 kilowatt charger when it comes to it, because the battery pack is massive.
That's true.
And you should be saving time as much as you can when you plug it in overnight.
And since we are on the topic of the battery pack itself, the warranty. What they've mentioned right now, again, things may just change at the time of final sale. Lifetime warranty for people who buy it new and register it as a private vehicle. If you're the second owner, the warranty package is 10 years or 2 lakh kilometers, whichever comes first. But that's applicable from the first date of delivery. So whatever the first owners used up, it's going to eat into that. But definitely something that's quite confidence expiring. It's something that a lot of EV manufacturers, I feel, are going to start doing more and more. It's going to become like a global NCAP rating where it's more the norm than the exception, or a marketing tool for that matter. And as a product overall, it definitely seems like something that's delivering great value for money based on what they're offering as the starting price.
Yeah.
Because this kind of tech, these kind of features, this kind of design, ride, performance, access to nearly 300 horsepower in a family car, it's money that any international luxury car manufacturer would be asking for 75 lakh rupees at the very least.
Yeah.
Granted, that's also a function of the fact that these cars
There's-
are locally
yeah.
assembled and not manufactured.
And there
but
is
it is
brand
what it is.
value, but yeah.
It is what it is. So my view is this car currently they're saying 22 for the base model. Let's say we jump that up, right? Let's say push comes to shove, 35 lakh rupees on road in a city like Mumbai.
Yeah.
It would still be value for money at that price, with one simple caveat, and this is the one that we had mentioned with the B6E as well. Our experience and any journalist experience that you've had so far
Yeah.
with the B6E or the XEV 9E, it's been based on this first lot of vehicles.
Yeah.
Yes, there have been glitches. Yes, there are some vital issues in terms of fitment, in terms of niggles that they have to fix before they go to market. And in my view, considering how much is new with these vehicles, the platform, the software, the AI, the powertrain, the battery, the safety, everything, I would not encourage somebody to buy this in the first lot of cars.
Yeah.
We're just saying this because it's not something that we would do ourselves.
I mean, someone will have to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's,
Someone who didn't watch this video.
but there is some hope, right? Because what they're using is known to be globally stable, like the cells, for example. They're licensing BYD's blade technology, and that is known to be reliable. That is known to not, lose charge or lose, let's say, battery level all that quickly. It's known to be dependable in terms of range, in terms of managing temperature. Fundamentally, that is sorted. What's good about the XEV is good because we experienced it for a limited amount of time, and we'd want to spend some more time with it to
Correct.
have proper conclusions about the car. I want to spend more time in the rear seat. I know it's spacious, it's comfortable, but over long journeys, that's something that I'm waiting to find out. I want to do a range test on it. We need to do an
Yes,
episode
yes,
of Drive to Death
100%.
with the XEV 9E. But largely on the face of it, the kind of product that the XEV 9E is, I want to say it will make you question whether you need that Ioniq 5 or the EV6.
100%.
Unless you want a brand Hyundai or a brand Kia, there possibly is no reason to spend the extra whatever lakh rupees. You're not commenting because Mahindra's very cleverly, slyly, shrewdly just told us the starting price for the smaller battery pack. But like he said, even if it goes up to 35, 40 lakh rupees on road, anything beyond that will be slightly questioning logic. But that car is capable for what it brings to the table.
Correct. Basically, what we're saying is the car scores extremely high on desirability, extremely high on tech, extremely high on sensibility. As a product, right now, all we're saying is because of the limited impressions we've got so far and the handful of issues that we have run into and feedback that we hope to see addressed. Right now, I will say add to cart. Wait a bit before you punch in that OTP and get the delivery.
Discount code मिलेगा क्या?
Manage कर लेंगे.
ठीक है. So that's it for this video of the Ziganalysis. If you enjoyed that, please give us a like. Any questions, queries, leave them down in the comment section. Subscribe if you haven't already. We do a lot of fun stuff on Instagram. Go follow us there. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. See you.